After e4, b6, d4, bishop b7, bishop d3. When black plays the Fianchetto defense, we play knight f3, and we play this setup, and after bishop to g7, we've seen this in the previous video, white continues with h4. In the previous video we went through h5 and black stopping the whole idea of h4, h5 and so on. What happens if black doesn't play a pawn in the center and immediately develops the knight? So let's say knight to c6. We should not play the move d5 here. It's an emotional move. We're attacking the knight here, but we're not achieving anything. We're making this light square bishop weak forever. We play c3 to defend the d4 pawn a little bit further. And after knight f6, black has done this setup. The two fianchettos and the two knights. This is fairly popular, especially in blitz games online or rapid games online. White now continues with e5, attacking the knight, and in this case we're not really losing control over the center because we've built this nice pawn chain, and now we have this bishop is actually a strong piece, unlike before when we would have had these two pawns on the light squares when black played knight c6. Now we're just going to play like this, but this is actually much better as we started pushing the h4 pawn and then h5. This bishop will gain significant strength eventually. Let's go through two main ideas, knight to g4 and knight to d5. It's pointless to see knight h5 because g4 traps the knight, and knight g8 is a pattern that, I mean, it's completely wrong, and we will see why also during this video. We're gonna know exactly what to do in this very unlikely situation. So let's go through knight to g4. White continues with h5. Of course, taking the pawn in h5 is terrible for black because we're able to take back with the rook, and we have double attack on h7, and we're controlling the open file. Black will not be able to castle, and it's also going to take just too long for black to be able to castle on the queen side because he's going to have to make some maybe d6 or e6 moves, then develop the queens. But we're going to see through this video, we're going to see how to punish all of this attempt. After h5, if black tries to castle, best move by white is rook to h4, attacking the knight. The knight cannot move anywhere without being taken. h6 is not a safe square. If black goes to h6, then we can take the pawn in g6. We have double attack on this knight, and the knight's got nowhere to go. After f5, white continues by taking en passant, and after the knight goes back to f6, we will make use of our h5 pawn to take in g6. White's advantage is huge. There's nothing the black can do. Taking the pawn doesn't help because if bishop takes back, and then white's idea of queen to d3 will either lead white to checkmate or black to sacrifice a lot of material. And best move according to the engine is h6, but even then we're going to take the pawn in h6. Black is powerless. He can't really move this queen to e8, for example, to let it enter the king territory and give some support because the pawn in g6 is supported by the bishop. The rook can move. Best move by black is to take the bishop in h6, allowing the king some escape after rook takes back. Needless to say that knight g4 doesn't work because rook h4 attacks the knight again, and white has an idea of playing queen to d2 now. So if the knight goes back to f6, then queen to d2, and this is unstoppable. So in this position, if king goes to g7, still the rook goes back to h4, controls the open file. And now let's look, the last idea we're going to look at in this type of line is rook trying to trade with the rook in the h file. White continues with knight b to d2, and the thing is that this pawn in g6 is controlling two crucial squares. So even if black were to trade the rook, the problem is that afterwards the arrival of the queen over the h file will be met by the white king being able to play the other knight to f3 and then develop the queen and castle alongside. And so the fact that black's queen is placed straight after this rook isn't ideal because then black will love to control the file with the rook. So what happens after e6? The idea is to allow the knight to go to e7, come with an attack on g6, and also to make this bishop much stronger. So e6 is a perfectly justifiable move. White continues with g3, knight e7, and now queen to e2. Clearly, white considers idea of potentially castling alongside. Let's just remember that if the rook takes our rook, we can take back with the knight. Although it looks tempting to reunite the pawn structure, taking back with the knight is the best move, especially since it allows us to play knight f3, which is ideal for white. White doesn't have to worry about the knight going to square like d5, for example, because of how the white pawns are placed. The black knight going to a white square, meaning it will have to land to a dark square. It's going to be a problem for black. It's just a waste of a move, and white will go on with long castling and then placing the other rook to h1. We're going to go through knight f5. But what happens if black takes the pawn in g6? Then we can take the knight. And after king takes back, white checks. King goes back to safety, or well, not really safe, but the safest square is king to g7. Even then, we're going to play queen to e3, targeting a dark square. And this is going to be game over. Black taking the rook doesn't help because of queen g5 anyway. And after the king moves, well, king moving to the h5 will allow us to take the rook with check. King moving back, we can take the rook with the pawn and prepare the arrival of the other rook into the game. We also have ideas of like knight g6, and we have a passed pawn in the h file. In this position after knight f5, we can take the knight, pawn takes back. Now we can swap rook even, and either way, white still keeps a good advantage. Queen takes rook is not possible because of queen e7, infiltration of the queen, and we're also attacking this knight, so this is game over. If king h6, then best move is long castle, and white's winning the game easily. Back at this position, if king takes the rook, while the queen is still safeguarding the two squares, preventing the arrival of the white queen, white castles long side. You can tell what went wrong in this game is that black played the two Fianchettos defense, and he left out the control of the center. It allowed us to attack his pieces with our pawns, have more control over the center, and black is left out of development. This rook never played, this queen has been useless. White's development has been harmonious. After long castling, white will go on with this g6 passed pawn, two extra pawns basically, and black's king is very unsafe. What happens after, let's say, knight to e4? Just to make an example, there's plenty of potential moves now that are possible, but with this unsafe king, you just go and have fun. Rook h1 and king g7 is met by queen e3, winning the game. The black queen can't go into the defense of the square. h6 because of the white rook. And what happens if instead, after rook h1 check, king goes to g8, queen to c4 check is the right move? What's the goal of this move? Well, the white queen is threatening to just literally infiltrate and go for a checkmate. This is now forcing black to play one only move, which is d5. This is very clever because this move now the queen will have to go back to e2, but what we have achieved is that this bishop is now not active anymore. And afterwards we've also allowed the knight to reach the square e5, and knight there will be sitting in peace forever. White's best move is knight to e5 after black plays, let's say for example c5. That is an idea for black to activate this minor piece that is not being activated really the whole game. White ignores that and plays knight to e5, and the ideas of infiltrating with the queen on the h file. The advantage is about plus 10. I think we can end this line here.